Hey students, welcome to another lesson with Mrs. T. This is a chapter 4 topic that we're going to discuss this week. So we're bouncing around in the textbook, that's not new, but we're going to arrive on chapter 4 this particular week, and it's about culture. Now the title is not simply the word culture, but this overarching theme, culture, is all throughout chapter 4. And I wanted to give you a little bit deeper, or not deeper, maybe more thorough definition of the word culture than your textbook author presents to you. I believe that the textbook author says something like culture is the set of norms, it's the set of beliefs and customs, something like that, that are particular to a society or a group of people. And what I want to do is add some more detail to that, because we have learned so much about different subsistence strategies. We've learned so much about people living in rural areas compared to urban areas. We've learned about first world nations and development issues compared to second world or developing countries, or third world, undeveloped or underdeveloped countries. And so there's a very different way, there's a very different outlook on life, what life is for, what you're supposed to do, what's important, what's not important. There's a very different outlook in these societies around the world based on your degree of development, based on your level of industrialization, based on what your subsistence strategy is, or whether you're a first world, second world, or third world nation. And so culture always is the collection of knowledge that a people have in order to get by in life. And so, for instance, if you are a pastoral society compared to an agrarian society or an agricultural society, you have a very different idea about the foods that you eat, about the way that you prepare those foods, about where, what you use land for instance. Even that concept of land ownership that we looked at when we studied agriculture for the first time. This is a concept that in your knowledge level, if you come from a horticultural society or a foraging society or a pastoral society, land ownership, that concept is not part of what you learn from the people that you're born to in that society. You don't learn that as part of your culture. And so culture is the knowledge that we learn from those who came before us. It is the set of skills that we have in order to get ourselves through a day, through a week, through a month, etc. It's the customs that we follow, like putting a pumpkin on your doorstep in the fall months, or planning something for spring break or graduation, in May. So these are customs that roll around on a predictable schedule. Values, like our ideas of what right or wrong is. I think we've talked about eating insects or eating meat that maybe is not typically found in Kroger, like horse meat or something. Like, do we find that as acceptable or unacceptable? What are our ideas of right versus wrong, just or unjust things? Those ideas vary from one culture to the next, one geopolitical society to the next, yes, but even within a society as diverse as ours is in the United States, we have very different ideas, from urban areas to rural areas, or if you look at a localized culture like the Amish compared to general society around us, there are very different ideas and value systems that can be found from one type of culture to the next. The rituals that we perform are very different from one society to the next. There are, in a lot of societies, there are gender rituals where you have to publicly go through some sort of trial or some sort of really challenging ritual in order to be able to prove that you are a man or ready to be a woman. And then you're allowed to do the behaviors that are associated with what a woman is or what a man is in society. And sometimes our rituals are something as simple as a graduation ceremony from high school or kindergarten graduation, or, receiving a medal for job well done. These are rituals that can mark a transition. Yesterday I didn't know how to do this. Today I have proven that I have. Here's my certificate of completion, or whatever that is. And so we have rituals from one society to the next that we can observe. And those rituals often follow a belief system. And so when I say belief, please don't only go to religious philosophies. Yes, of course, most of us go, oh, beliefs have to do with religious philosophies. Yes, but a belief can also be something as simple as understanding that, I should say, an understanding that urbanization is a cure for poverty, for instance. So that is a belief or a theory that this particular aspect of Western culture, urbanization, industrialization, development, these concepts that we've recently studied, are all things that can cure a situation that maybe the folks who are in it to begin with, in rural areas, they are practicing, subsistence agriculture or something like this, but it's not part of the corporate profit structure. They're not using the land for surplus or for a profit margin. Perhaps this kind of belief is that that this culture is not doing things properly with the natural resources. And so belief is anything that you subscribe to as a solution to a problem, not merely something, in addition to, but not merely something that can be attributed to a religious philosophy. Okay, so yeah, definitely religious philosophies fall under the realm of belief. However, you can say that Republican point of view versus Democratic point of view are two different belief systems in the political realm. And so beliefs are different from one place to the next. That's one of the reasons when we studied development, when we first started studying development, we looked at the gross national happiness of Bhutan. They can't compete with some of the export-import kind of metrics that international politics and economics judge countries against each other, make this comparison. And so gross national happiness is their answer, this kind of a protest to this economic heavy hitting that a lot of the development and industrialization pushes look to, your import, export, and derivatives and things like this that you acquire or produce as a nation. And so the belief there is, hey, we don't need necessarily this urbanization or this industrialization, modernization, these things that are outside of our reach, and so don't impose this idea on us, essentially. And so you can look at that as a belief system too. Okay, and so material and non-material ideas and concepts are also part of culture. Material objects, of course, are anything that's tangible. Can you tell sometimes by the way a person is dressed whether they are from your area of the country even, let alone the country that you originally came from? I remember once I was traveling through a rural area in Iowa, and I just had like a jean skirt and I think an orange t-shirt on. I stopped in someplace and somebody asked me, where are you from? I hadn't spoken or anything, so I didn't hear my accent. Somebody asked me, you're not from around here, are you? And I'm like, no. And they said, I can tell because we don't dress that way. I'm like, an orange t-shirt and denim skirt? Anyway. So they could tell by looking at me, hey, she's not from around these parts, right? So that's a subtle kind of way that you can pick up on. Sometimes clothing from one place to the next is extremely different. For instance, we can look at beliefs about modesty and clothing and look at the hijab or the burqa in some of the Islamic nations in the world. You can look at current events like the horrific stuff that's going on in Iran right now with all the protests having to do with a gal who unfortunately died when she was arrested for a modesty violation, for a clothing violation, because she was showing too much of her body. I believe it was her hair in this particular case. You're not supposed to show your hair if you're a female in some of these countries. That's the belief anyways. And so the idea about what your clothing is going to be comes into that material concept. Or chopsticks versus a fork and spoon, right? So there are material items that are specific to certain cultures around the world, and these things can identify you, can be part of your cultural identity, which is what a lot of the chapters, a lot of the weeks in the future are going to look at, is cultural identity surrounding some of the concepts, the non-material concepts about things like race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, these kinds of things that are at the forefront of social policy politics, or at least identity politics in the United States. But if you look at first world, second world, third world countries, or places where belief systems, religious belief systems, are extremely different from one society to the next, or a society that is not diverse like our society is, maybe a society like the Maasai of East Africa or the Japanese, they are very closed societies that maybe like learning and visiting other cultures, but as far as adopting other cultural traits from outsiders, it's just not something that happens. And so very homogeneous societies end up with concepts about how we must preserve our way and make it distinctly different from other ways. And so the concept of self or cultural group and the other becomes evident when we look at non-material ideas or intangible parts of culture, like attitudes and philosophies that are dominant in a particular belief system or value system. The knowledge about what reality is like and how we interpret reality is different from one place to the next. And so that's what chapter 4 is all about. And I think it's kind of fun to look at these differences, and that's what we're going to be doing this week. So please read the chapter, and I'll see you in the next video lessons. Thank you. Bye.